We're about to cover the entire 180 million year reign of the dinosaurs. And believe me, it is an absolutely epic story of extinction, evolution, and giants that ruled the Earth. But here's the crazy part. It all starts with an ending.
So before we even get to the first dinosaur, you need to see this number. 96%. That's how much of all marine life on Earth was completely wiped out in a cataclysm we now call the Great Dying. This happened before the dinosaurs even showed up, setting this incredibly desolate stage for what would become one of life's greatest comeback stories.
So we're going to tackle their story in three major acts. First up, the Triassic, where the dinosaurs took their first little steps. Then we get to the Jurassic, when they became absolute giants. And finally, the Cretaceous, their spectacular and, well, final chapter.
Okay, so our story kicks off about 252 million years ago in the Triassic period. And you gotta understand, this was not some lush paradise. This was a world in recovery mode, a time for the scrappy survivors to try and find a foothold on a planet that had just been almost totally sterilized. Back then, all the land on Earth was basically smooshed together into one giant supercontinent called Pangaea. And if you're picturing lush jungles like in the movies, you gotta think again. The inside of Pangaea was mostly just a vast, incredibly harsh desert. We're talking intensely hot and dry.
So who actually made it through the Great Dying? Well, not many. You had some tough, resilient plants, and two main groups of animals that just barely clung to life. There were the synapsids. These are ancient relatives of mammals, so kind of our distant ancestors. And then you had the archosaurs. And this second group, the archosaurs, they're the ones we really need to keep an eye on.
The very first true dinosaurs pop up around 230 million years ago, but they were nothing like the monsters you're imagining. Little guys like E-Raptor were tiny, maybe only about 3 feet long, but their size wasn't a weakness at all. It meant they were fast, they were nimble, and they could get out of trouble quickly. So what was their secret? What made them so special? It was all in how they stood. This was their key evolutionary advantage. You see, unlike other reptiles whose legs kind of sprawled out to the sides, dinosaurs had their legs positioned directly underneath their bodies. This was a total game changer. It allowed for way more efficient movement, more speed, better stamina, and even the ability to stand up on 2 legs.
So, just as the dinosaurs are starting to find their groove, bam! The planet gets hit with another catastrophe, the Triassic-Jurassic extinction. Huge volcanic eruptions mess with the climate all over again. But weirdly enough, for the dinosaurs, this was a massive stroke of luck. It wiped out most of their bigger archosaur competitors, basically clearing the board and leaving the world wide open for them to take over.
And this leads us right into the Jurassic period. With their main competition out of the picture, the dinosaurs didn't just survive, they absolutely thrived. This became their golden age, an era that really, truly earned the name the Age of Giants. The world itself was changing in a big way. Pangaea started to crack apart, creating new coastlines and seas, and this totally transformed the climate. It went from being that harsh, dry desert to a much warmer, wetter world just covered in these incredible lush forests. All that new plant life, that was basically the fuel for an explosion in animal size.
So during the Jurassic, the dinosaur family tree really branched out into 3 main groups you'll definitely recognize. First, you've got the sauropods. Yep, the iconic long-necked plant eaters. Then you had the theropods, the terrifying 2-legged carnivores like Allosaurus. And finally, the ornithischians, this super diverse group of herbivores famous for their defensive gear, like the plated stegosaurus.
Let's just focus on those sauropods for a sec. Why on earth did they get so unbelievably huge? Well, this quote really nails it. Sure, being enormous was great for defense, but it was also a biological necessity. They needed these giant digestive systems just to process the insane amounts of tough, low-nutrition plants they had to shovel in all day. And what's wild is that to hold up all that weight, their bones were filled with air sacs, a lot like modern birds, which made them way lighter than they looked. But you know, it's really important to remember that not all Jurassic dinosaurs were giants. I mean, roaming around the feet of titans like Brachiosaurus, you had tiny little dinosaurs like Compsognathus. This thing was only about the size of a chicken, and it would just zip around hunting small lizards and insects. It just goes to show you, diversity came in all sizes.
And that brings us to the final and probably the most famous act in the dinosaur saga, the Cretaceous period. This is when dinosaur diversity just hit its absolute peak. I mean, we're talking about the all-stars, the A-listers that we all know and love today.
The world in the Cretaceous was just humming with life. The continents kept drifting apart, moving closer to where they are now, and the climate was this warm greenhouse state. And what's really fascinating is that this is when flowering plants first showed up, which led to the evolution of totally new insects like bees and butterflies to pollinate them. The whole ecosystem was changing. And just look at this lineup. The Cretaceous gave us the most legendary dinosaurs of all time. For the theropods, you had the king himself, T-Rex, and the incredible Spinosaurus. The sauropods became the truly massive titanosaurs, like Argentinosaurus. And the ornithischians gave us amazing creatures, from the dome-headed Pachycephalosaurus to the famous three-horned Triceratops. This was their grand finale.
Just to give you a sense of scale here, let's talk about one of those titanosaurs. Argentinosaurus could stretch over 98 feet long. That makes it one of the biggest land animals to ever walk the earth. I mean, the scale is it's mind-boggling.
For 180 million years, dinosaurs had dominated this planet. They had survived climate change, volcanic eruptions, even other extinction events. They just seemed invincible. But their long, long reign was brought to a sudden, violent end by a threat they never could have seen coming.
And here's how it all went down. An asteroid about 6 miles wide slammed into the Earth. The immediate blast triggered wildfires that swept across the globe and caused unbelievably massive tsunamis. But the real killer? That was the aftermath. All the dust and debris that got thrown up into the atmosphere. It blocked out the sun, plunging the world into a long, dark impact winter. The plants died, the food chains completely collapsed, and in the end, 75% of all life on Earth just vanished.
But life, as they say, finds a way. The survivors tended to be small, adaptable creatures. Among them were our own ancestors, the mammals, who'd been living in the shadows of the dinosaurs for millions of years. But here's the real twist. One group of dinosaurs did survive. That's right, the birds you see outside your window today, they are the direct descendants of dinosaurs. They are living dinosaurs.
And that really brings us to the most profound point of all. The single worst day in the history of life on Earth directly paved the way for the age of mammals and, eventually, for us. The dinosaurs' catastrophic end was literally our beginning. And it really makes you stop and wonder, now that we're the ones shaping the planet, what will the legacy of our age be?